How's it going, crypto community? Welcome back to part 3 of blockchain and bitcoins, a discussion between Brad Garlinghouse and Ross Lechow. Ross is from the IMF, as we've discussed in previous videos. If you've not watched the previous 2 parts to this, I highly encourage you to go back and watch those before you begin watching this one, just so you can be up to date on what we've been discussing so far in this deep dive. Real quick, if you are new, also please hit that sub button and be sure to obviously smash that like if you enjoy content like this. Also ring that bell so that you can enjoy any other future deep dives that I partake in, especially if you do obviously enjoy my perspective on these things, which I'm hopefully being as honest as possible about and making sure to assert whenever there's any degree of uncertainty in what I'm saying to be true, which I feel I do a pretty good job of. My community, at least so far, feels that I do. So if you feel I'm not, again, please be sure to leave in the comments your constructive criticism. That first word's more important than the second. So, with all that said and out of the way, let's just jump straight into part 3 here. We're going to be starting with Ross asking Brad a question, I believe.
So Brad, maybe I can now turn the tables on you.
Sounds good.
And ask you perhaps a more philosophical question. How will blockchain transform the global financial sector and more broadly society in the years to come?
Well, so I think this is a good question to conclude on, and I'll give you another plug. We will switch to Pigeonhole here in a moment, although I think Ross and I are both going to make predictions before we wrap up as we look 1 year ahead. But let me touch briefly. I do think it's useful to step back sometimes, and I think we get so caught up in the craziness of the crypto markets, and we lose sight of big picture. What problem are we really trying to solve at a macro level? And for Ripple, that always comes back to a common 3 words as a refrain, and it's really about enabling an internet of value. I moved to Silicon Valley 21 years ago in the earliest days of the internet that we all enjoy today, and the internet as we know it today was really about data interoperability. I can access any piece of data for anywhere in the world, whether it's a piece of information, whether it's a number. That data interoperability has really catalyzed lots of positive momentum for the global commerce and even global society. When we talk about money interoperability or value interoperability, that doesn't exist today. And if we can make value networks interoperable in the same way data networks are interoperable, I think there's a lot of secondary and tertiary impacts that are hard to predict, but could get very exciting. So in the same way that 21 years ago, I don't think we could have predicted that you could take out your mobile phone and click on your Grab app and have a car waiting for you outside in seconds or minutes or fast. It's hard to predict exactly how some of the dynamics of dramatically improving the speed and dramatically lowering the cost of payments is going to have in terms of, changing society. One of the things I'll comment on is, there's close to 2 to 3 billion people who are either unbanked or largely underbanked in the global financial society. These are people who, if we can bring them into that community, they have great benefits to that. And there's a reason, banks don't serve the underbanked community because they don't want to. They don't serve them because they can't do it profitably. Banks are profit-seeking engines. And if they can serve a customer profitably, they will do so. And so I think blockchain technologies have the opportunity by reducing friction and reducing costs dramatically to totally change the nature of how payments flow. I'll give you one quick example, which is kind of crazy, I admit, is a lot of us don't think about, here in Singapore, I believe you get paid once a month. In the United States, you get paid once every 2 weeks. Has everybody thought about why you get paid once a month or once every 2 weeks? It comes down to the friction of payments. And if we can remove the friction of payments, why can't you get paid every day? Or even more crazily, why don't you get paid every hour or every second? You could have a stream of value showing up in your whatever repository of value. Now, why you need to get paid every second, I'm not sure. But I do think there's a lot of dynamics that have been built around getting paid every 2 weeks or getting paid every month. And as we remove the friction of payments and make that dramatically easier, I think you're going to see secondary and tertiary effects that are very difficult to predict, just like we couldn't have predicted Grab 20 years ago.
So, ultimately, what did Brad start with? Synergy, right? What we talked about mostly in the last video with Ross. And what synergies did Brad just talk about? He brought up the emergence of the internet and how it made moving information so simple. You're now listening to me. People from all over the world are listening to me now. This is insanity. It's so crazy. Our world's so small now because of the internet. I can talk with anybody anywhere. It doesn't matter where I am, as long as we can communicate in the same language. Unfortunately, I'm limited to English because thank you, American education system, for failing me. But my saltiness about my upbringing aside, and the failings of my nation on my ability to communicate with multiple cultures, right? Sorry, it's my favorite thing to take the piss out on when it comes to how this nation that I exist in operates. But this is a talk on blockchains and banks, so let's get back onto that. The reason I got even into that point was because this internet of this network of knowledge, the internet, right? This network of data is synonymous essentially with the blockchain internet of value and what they're going to do, right? Like, knowledge is now everywhere. Everybody can share their opinions with everybody, and we're all growing as individuals because of it. Well, those of us who are open and accepting of new knowledge and new understandings to develop our own understanding, we're all growing as a result of that. And most of you in the blockchain community are rapidly growing now because of these new understandings you're developing as an individual through learning about not only this blockchain revolution, but also about how the greater system conducts itself, and therefore how you should consider conducting yourself in relation to that to make sure that you can continue down a future road of success, maybe, right? And this analogy of what you are doing is also descriptive of what Ripple is doing in regards to getting their network adopted by the world, right? Isn't that awesome how those two things, those concepts, especially if what I described is what you are actively doing in your life, now you understand what Ripple and Brad Garlinghouse are doing every single day in regards to making sure that they are actively getting everybody around them to be like, okay, you're trustworthy. What do we have to do to work together? How can we agree? What agreements can we come to make sure that we're all in synergistic agreement on the important points of this emerging ecosystem to help ensure that it can grow to become the greatest ecosystem it possibly can become, right?
All right. So with that, before we go to questions, a prediction for what we'll be surprised about 1 year from now.
I think in making predictions in this space, you should probably think of the most outrageous thing you can possibly say, because it'll probably come true within the next 12 months. I'll be a little bit more conservative, I guess, in my prediction. I think if you look at the work of jurisdictions in designing law and regulation around crypto assets, I think, or fintech more generally, I think it's certainly the case that the level of cooperation and the depth of the conversation will be much greater in a year than it is today. I think there's so much work that's being done at the international level on these issues, not only by the IMF and the World Bank, but also other organizations that we work closely with, like FATF, like the Financial Stability Board, or the Basel Committee. Basically, everybody is focused on fintech, thinking through its potential and thinking through regulatory approaches. And this is going to certainly deepen. I think from the perspective of the IMF, I think our engagement with our members will continue to repeat a phrase, deepen. I think the Bali FinTech Agenda is something that we regard as a very important development that will help us work closely with our member countries. And I have to say that in all this work, one can't underestimate the leadership at the head of many of these institutions. Christine Lagarde, our managing director, has really been a driving force in our work on fintech. And of course, she'll be a keynote speaker here on Wednesday. But all this to say that, international cooperation is essential, and I think that cooperation is happening in ways that will result in greater cross-border initiatives and, as I say, a more effective conversation about regulation.
And so there you have it. The World Bank, the IMF, the FATF, the Basel Group, they're all working, as Ross just said, not Brad, Ross, member of the IMF, said, they're all looking at fintech. What fintech? The one on stage right now that he's looking at, right? That's really all you need to know about what he just said. All these major supranational financial organizations are looking at fintech and deciding how best do we help this ecosystem grow. Back to you, Brad.
So my prediction, about 1 year ago, I actually was here at the Singapore FinTech Festival, and I got in trouble when I went back to the office because the PR team said I had overstepped by predicting that within a year, I predicted that financial institutions like banks would be using XRP in their payment flows. And that was a year ago that I made that prediction, and I go back to the office, and everybody was like, Brad, you're not allowed to say things like that. It turns out I was right, which I remind the team of. So now as I look forward a year from now, like what are the things that are hard for us to imagine being true? And not even specific to Ripple or to XRP's community. I think one of the things that will surprise us a year from now is that banks will be custodying digital assets directly.
Oh, pardon. Did Brad say that would happen a year from now? In November of 2018? Brad, you need to think a little more impossible because that just happened yesterday with SPI, virtual currency, becoming the first bank in the world to custody for other institutions the possession of digital assets, including XRP. Well. How many times can the real BG just predict the future as if he's helping shape it and create it every single day of his existence right now, right? Dedicated to this project, this world-scale, life-changing project that we are all a part of as stakeholders in the digital asset that all of these financial institutions are looking to as the standard setter for the rest of the ecosystem. There's a reason why I hashtag XRP the standard, and that's why. Because the standard, the status quo, the old guard, whatever terminology you want to use to describe the traditional financial institutions, they're all focused on this man and the individuals at the company he's on stage right now representing, right? They're all looking at him, and that's why I'm looking at him. And I hope that's why you are really looking at him and why you're actually listening to me, because these are the people I care to hear from. And I don't, it's nothing against like the articles. Like I do a lot of articles, they're content, and that helps get more people attracted to my channel. But these deep dives are really what I enjoy. And I know that they're longer content because we're going over such big things and I'm oftentimes going, on these tangents. But these are the important things, and I'm hoping that the ideas that I'm presenting at least make you think and wonder about, what is going on and just how big is this financial revolution and how big can XRP really get, These are important questions to bear in mind because you need to be looking at the long-term future, not the short-term scale, how quick can I get rich? No, it's how wealthy can I become, right? That's why we're looking at the long term. We can we can hype up the near term with articles and stuff and talk about new developments, but what I want everybody to be focused on is the long term, the big picture, as Brad likes to say, right? So, without further ado, let's jump back into this, what Brad's got to say here.
And I think right now we think about that and think, look, there's no way that's going to happen. They're too conservative. And I think what you're seeing is, two things happening. One is banks are seeing that a lot of money is being made by digital asset exchanges globally, and banks are profit motivated. The second, and as we've talked about up here, certainly Ross has made very clear, is regulatory clarity and regulatory frameworks enable banks and financial institutions to lean into these markets. And I think we will surprise ourselves by this time. And by the way, I'll also predict that it will be banks in the ASEAN markets where there is this regulatory clarity and there is a lot of progressive forward thinking. They'll be the first to actually allow for crypto assets custody.
Oh, you mean SBI virtual currency will be the first? It's almost as if you knew that, right?
In their accounts. All right, with that, we'll turn it over to questions. And I see a bunch of questions on this screen, which I can't really read from here, but we're supposed to pick some. Can you see those? Oh, there's 2 votes.
Let me try.
Do you see IMF holding crypto assets in the future? Oh, they're over here. That's easier. You want to take one? Go for it. The first one's for you. IMF. Do you see IMF holding crypto assets in the future? I did not put that up there.
Remember, I'm from the...
Look at his face! And I'm sorry, I gotta back it up because you have to listen to Ross. This is what made this interview so this is where really the 589 hype really began, right? Everybody was so convinced that what that was going on in this exchange right here between these two was like, oh, it's so game. And it really does feel like it, even still watching this, and especially after what we've seen, right? Like, you kind of have to be, I have Asperger's. I admit this I've admitted this many times over, but even I am attuned enough to body language and facial expressions to realize that, this is something Brad right now is bubbling that this was the first question to pop up, and that he read that just like serendipitously. He's like, oh, you saw he almost swore on stage because he was so excited that was the question somebody asked. And he just couldn't help but ask him again. He's like, "You want to pick one?" And he's like, "I gotta read it again." Brett, hey, this one's for you. What do you think? Do you want to touch it? He's like a kid in the candy store there, and it excites me. That's why I'm so excited right now, just like speaking about it, because it's like it's a memory. But now that I'm watching through this again, it's such a good memory to relive, and I hope that you're enjoying this.
Remember, I'm from the legal department. I'm supposed to be very conservative about these things.
Do you see Brad? He just bounced out of his chair, just giggling. He's so happy. And look at Ross. He's like, I can't say it. I'm not allowed. I'm from the legal department. I've got to be conservative here.
I don't want to go into great details about
Maybe I should take what the IMF is going to...
Maybe you should tell us, Brad. Are you going to tell us? No, you're not. But you might give us a breadcrumb. A breadcrumb? Brad Garlic House? Garlic bread? Right? Wait, what was the acronym? Was it Brad Garlic House? Or Bread Garlic House? Yes, I think that's what it was. Bread Garlic House. Yes, and his breadcrumbs. All right. Ross is so happy to let go. He's like, you, how dare you make that one the question? We can't talk. All right.
I think we stunned Ross into silence with that one.
For that to happen, okay, under the current legal framework, some country would have to use a crypto asset as its currency.
Oh, so somebody has to use the asset as its currency. Do you mean the OnePay app, which is, MoneyTap? Is it MoneyTap or OnePay? Whichever one is being used by SBI and 80%, hopefully by the end of this year, of all Japanese financial institutions to facilitate commerce in Japan? Oh? So the IMF's going to hold XRP because Japan's about to hold XRP and utilize it as a currency. Interesting stuff, right?
Which goes to the next question that was on the list, actually. Will central banks issue digital currency become a reality in the next few years?
Well, again, there's a lot of work being done by a number of central banks in different regions of the world. I think generally speaking, many of these central banks are coming to the conclusion that they don't see the benefits right now of doing it, but they're very seriously considering the use case. And I think as work proceeds, they maybe the possibility may increase. Particularly the Bank of Canada with its Project Jasper experiment has realized that a central bank digital currency on its own may not offer benefits now, but when combined with other things like the security settlement system, the use cases begin to emerge. So let's keep an open mind.
So security settlement system. What is a security settlement system? A liquidity source, a decentralized liquidity source which facilitates exchange between these central bank distributed digital currencies, right? So, what did we just spend a few previous deep dives on? The SNB research conference, where basically the big topic was these central bank distributed currencies. And what did we see as a result of that conference? Many people who were previously anti-blockchain are now pro-blockchain and discussing the use cases for the CBDCs. Also, we see all these banks and financial institutions coming out with their own CBDCs, which we now understand to be useless unless connected up to this SSS that he discussed, the security, I forget the acronym that I just gave you, but what he's just discussing is built into this, right? You have to have your central bank distributed currency built and integrated into this background network to facilitate liquidity across these currencies.
We have a few more minutes. We'll take a couple of these questions. I'll just add to the answer on this one real quickly. It strikes me that there's a little bit, there's a slightly controversial statement about this. Don't central banks already issue digital versions of their fiat? And what I mean by that is when I log into my bank account and I see a number representing my deposits, that's a digital representation. They don't actually have the dollars behind that for everything we have. Moreover, and I think I have some Singapore dollars in my pocket, there's a serial number on that Singapore dollar that, okay, it is 100, but wait, in the U.S. there's serial numbers on here. Yes, there's a serial number on here, 3AX561167. It's in some ways, what's the difference between having a serial number and having a digitization of the Singapore dollar? So I think it's not a very big leap. So the question, I think, was in the next few years, I think certainly you're going to see central governments that have digital currency within the next few years. My prediction. All right. The next one, oh, no, we already touched that. Well, how blockchain can aid the cross-border payments, we kind of already touched on that. Even though it has 3 votes, I feel like we already hit that one. Is that okay?
How does Ripple work with central banks?
Let's take that one. It had 0 votes, but since Ross asked.
I'm curious.
How does Ripple work with central banks? So actually, Ripple, I think, has been a little bit of a contrarian in the crypto world because Ripple was very early to kind of say, look, if you want to enable these technologies, you have to work with government regulators, including central banks. I probably spend 20% of my time flying around the world, meeting with central banks, meeting with local regulatory agencies, in order to provide that clarity. When we sign up a bank, whether it's a bank in Kuwait, Abu Dhabi, Thailand, Philippines, they aren't going live until their regulator is saying, yes, either implicitly or explicitly getting approval to go live. And so that means that myself, as well as others on the Ripple team, are meeting with central banks to make sure they have clarity about how our technologies work. And to Ross's point, once these regulators understand that Ripple transactions are not circumventing regulatory frameworks, meaning they are KYC'd, they are monitored for money laundering, OFAC compliance, terrorist financing, and these things, they get very comfortable very quickly. I'm interpreting because they turned down the lights that they're done with us.
Probably.
Okay. There were some more questions up there, but I think we're good for today. I do want to thank the audience for joining us today. Hopefully this was a good understanding of how regulation is important to the ongoing development of blockchain and banking, and thank you very much.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much, Brad.
So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed this part 3. Always seem to save the best for last in these kind of discussions. I don't know why. It just seems to be a trend with them, right? So obviously, Brad just gave so many breadcrumbs there that it's hard to even digest all the breadcrumbs. But the ultimate takeaway is, in regards to the central bank distributed currencies and how Ripple is working with these central banks, is it's most of, well, at least a large portion of what Brad does is spending his time engaging with said individuals, right? Because it's important for him to be able to inform these individuals of what RippleNet is and how its digital asset operates and how it's KYC compliant and how they can utilize it to help reduce costs, and thus then those financial institutions go to regulators and say, hey, this is what this is how it can help, this is how we can regulate it. The regulators say, hey, thanks for the heads up, we'll get right on top of that because you guys know money. We're just regulators, we just are elected by the people, but you guys are professionals, so we'll listen to you. They go right up their regulations. They realize that nobody's regulations make sense with everybody's regulations, and so they're like, okay, we're going to have to take this to the international level. And so they all go collectively, the central banks collect together a few months later in Switzerland, where they're all like, okay guys, we got some big issues here, nobody agrees on what's going on, so what's going on here? They have all these panels, which we actually covered in a previous deep dive series, where they're like, okay, this is what these things are, this is how we're going to use them. Everybody spends some time in the back room, hammering out the details, agreeing on who gets what, divvies what shares, how much is going where, when, why, all that good stuff, right? And then we start hearing in the coming weeks after that, all these CBDCs are being released, and of course, the FUD machine that is the Bitcoin maximalist article community is spreading all kinds of fake news saying, oh, the central coins are gonna kill Ripple, Facebook coin is gonna kill Ripple, there's this private bank that's gonna release a CBDC, or its own centralized blockchain that's gonna kill Ripple. They're all gonna kill it. Kill it dead. Oh my gosh. Can the fake news be any more palpable, right? Ross Leckow is from the IMF. Go Google it, go Wikipedia, go look it up, right? The exchanges that you saw were genuine. You could tell by the body language. That wasn't faked excitement from Brad. Ross's expression was genuine, and he didn't just push it to the side. And when Brad offered to take it away, he's like, you know what? No. I'll add more onto it because why not? I'm in a position to. So it's really important to keep in mind just how close this relationship was even back in November, right? This is a relationship that is only closened as both groups have come to better understand and realize the genuine nature of both of their objectives and how they synergize together. And that's why we're seeing global adoption of Ripple over basically any other group, is because they were the first in and nobody else is even being considered, because nobody else is considering working with the financial institutions outside of XLM and maybe one or two others out there that I'm not aware of. But as Brad said earlier in, I believe, this video, Ripple is working, to create the framework, the Interledger protocol, which their developers helped spearhead and get into place, is equivalent to Internet's IP. Everybody has an IP address. Yeah, you don't know what an IP is, most likely, unless you're a computer nerd, but everybody's got one, and most people know that everybody's got an IP address, and that's how you get hacked or whatever, kind of whatever nonsense you've heard. But you don't really know what it is, but it enables us all to be communicating right now, right? And that's what's important about what Ripple is developing. The ILP on top of the RippleNet, the XRP ledger, right? The Interledger, that is what is facilitating this backbone of the new economy that's going to emerge from that backbone, that's going to grow. We're going to first Ripple, the backbone, then we're going to get all of our arms and legs and bones built off of that. There'll be the structural systems like your stores of value, your new digitized data log blockchain internet model, whichever one wins out, whether it's Ethereum or EOS or IOTA, whichever one's going to take the cake. We don't know yet. It's still too early for them. They're still young. Ethereum, honestly, is just way overvalued, and it's because it's such a well-established older idea that just took off, right? But it's not going to reach its maturity for a long, long time. And I think Vitalik would even agree with that statement. So, at any rate, that's my thoughts on this part 3. I hope you enjoyed this review of some old news but gold news, right? It's old but gold. And so, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you've watched through this whole 3-part series and you haven't subscribed to me yet, what are you doing? Come on, hit that subscribe. You know you want to. You know you enjoy this content. And of course, be sure to hit that like button since you're listening still, right? And why not ring that bell so that you can get notified about my next video series that I do. At any rate, I've been Jade Martian. You've been watching The Martian Report, and to all my XRP Martians out there, I'll see you in my next video on Mars.